Good evening. When we get started here, we usually start with an invocation, a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join us for that. Okay, and I'll add really quick before the roll call that the mayor is traveling this week, so I am filling in for her. And with that, can we please do a roll call?
Corliss.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Morales.
Here.
Nash. Stead.
Here.
Willett. 4 present, 2 absent.
Okay, first thing up on the agenda is the minutes for approval.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve City Council minutes from work session March 3rd, 2026, and City Council minutes from the regular evening meeting on March 3rd, 2026.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the vote?
Morales.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Next up, we have some special business. The mayor is bringing forward Cassidy Landry to serve on the Boise City for consideration to serve on the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board for the remainder of a 5-year term ending October 31st, 2026.
Madam Mayor, I ask for unanimous consent for the appointment of Cassidy Landry to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board for the remainder of a 5-year term ending October 31st, 2026.
Without objection. I was told that Cassidy is not in attendance tonight, but I think Councilmember Corliss, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I appreciate Cassidy being willing to step up onto this volunteer board. I also serve on the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority. It's a very special board. We have a lot of representation from the community. It serves a really big need when talking about housing. And I just want to thank her very much for her willingness and her participation to sit and support this board.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve all items on the consent agenda.
Second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, just a couple things. There's a few different items on here, interim budget changes that we approved earlier today that's making a couple of different affordable housing and permanent supportive housing projects available. That are a ton of work from our city staff and great partnerships with other folks in the community. Also something here for Metro Meals on Wheels, which actually provides food at our senior center, Boise Center. So it's so cool that we can have a partnership with a nonprofit that's mutually beneficial, and always love to give the nonprofits a shout out. So.
Thank you for that. Would the clerk please call the vote?
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, moving along. We don't have any ordinances on first reading, but we do have one on second reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection. And then next up, the third reading. We've got 2 ordinances there. The clerk has to read this is back to second reading. Thanks, clerk.
ORD-6-26 and ordinance CAR 25-00005 for properties located at 7607, 7675, 7710, 7767, 7794, 7805, 7840, and 7849 West Gratz Drive, Boise, Idaho 83709, and 422 South Auto Drive, Boise, Idaho 83709, and parcel S 111314190, parcel S 111314190, and parcel S 111314920, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from MX-3 mixed use active to MX-2 mixed use general, setting forth the reasons statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Now we can move on to third reading.
Madam Mayor, I move that further reading of ordinance 4-26 be dispensed with, and the record reflect it has been read the third time in full.
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 4-26, an ordinance CAR 25-00018 for property located at 2911 North 5 Mile Road, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way, from R-1C residential traditional to R-2 residential compact, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date. ORD 5-26, an ordinance amending Boise City Code BCC Title 1, Chapter 14 to rename the chapter City Records and Archives, amending existing definition and add new definitions, adding references to historic records and artifacts throughout the chapter, establishing the city archives, clarifying the role and responsibilities of the city clerk regarding records management and related duties, clarifying the role and responsibilities of the city archivist regarding the city archives, providing the responsibilities of city department heads, department records coordinators, and all city employees and officials regarding city records, setting forth general records requirements for all city officials and employees, clarifying the storage, maintenance, and management of city records and archives, simplifying standards regarding photographic and digital records, setting forth clearer language regarding access to city records for inspection and copying and the associated fees, removing redundant language that restates provisions of the Idaho Public Act or are otherwise unnecessary or move to different code sections within the chapter by repealing and striking from code the following sections: BCC Section 1-14-3 entitled Policy, BCC Section 1-14-8 entitled City Offices to Use Record Schedules, BCC Section 1-14-10 entitled One-Time Destruction of Obsolete Records, BCC Section 1-14-11 entitled Archives, BCC Section 1-14-12 entitled Preservation of Permanent Records, BCC Section 1-14-13 entitled Non-Current Records Not to be Maintained in Office Files, BCC Section 1-14-15 entitled Accessibility of Records on Microfilm or Digital Media, BCC Section 1-14-16 entitled Public Disclosure of Licensing Records, renumbering the subsequent code sections accordingly, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
I could take a motion now to approve the ordinance.
Pardon me, Madam Mayor, I move that ordinance 5-26 be approved,
And 4-26 as well, right?
and 4-26 as well. Thank you.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay. Moving right along, we'll move into subdivisions with HIP Townhouses subdivision SUB 25-23 will be presented by staff, Mr. Moser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 7 buildable lots and 1 common lot on 0.28 acres located at 1229 South Lincoln Avenue in an MX1 zone. The subject property is located approximately 370 feet south of the Boise the BSU campus and approximately 550 feet southeast of the intersection of Boise Avenue, Beacon Street, and Protest Road. The intersection is identified as a neighborhood activity center within Blueprint Boise, and the existing neighborhood is a mixture of single-family homes, multifamily residential uses, and some commercial uses located along Boise Avenue. This slide shows the site plan and the lot layout for the plat. In summary, the applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat for the HIP Townhouse subdivision, which is comprised of 6 townhomes and a duplex as seen here. The townhouse and the duplex will require their own zoning certificate approval, which are being reviewed administratively after the subdivision. As proposed, all lots will meet the dimensional standards of the MX1 zone, and the subdivision will include a cross-access and maintenance agreement for the shared driveway located in the interior to the site. A condition of approval will require the installation of a 5-foot detached sidewalk and a 10-foot landscape buffer with street trees along Rossi Street and a 5-foot detached sidewalk, 8-foot landscape buffer along Lincoln Street. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff? Okay, next we'll hear from the applicant then. Are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? Do you have more you'd like to add, or are you fine? Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. Is there a representative here from the neighborhood association that would like to speak? I think that's Crystal Allen. No, nothing online. Okay, seeing none. Any further questions from council? Yeah, is there anybody here from the public to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, then with that, I'll close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve subdivision 25-0023 located at 1229 South Lincoln Avenue, preliminary plat for residential subdivision comprised of 7 buildable and 1 common lot on 0.28 acres in an MX1 zone.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Nothing crazy on this one. Just this is really great to see. Bunch of really small units going into a spot that makes a whole lot of sense. I don't know if the intention is for students or families or whatever it may be, but we're able to get quite a few different units into that small little area. And I guess I think they're right next to Crickets, right? Or East Side Tavern these days as well. So good location for them too. Thanks for bringing this forward. Thanks for getting some of these small units. We usually don't see a lot of developments that get these smaller single family types of units in our city. So appreciate the work.
Great. With that, no further discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll? Oh, sorry. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay, next up we have the Ziggy subdivision, SUB 25-65. This is the Boise City preliminary plat. And we'll hear from staff again, Mr. Mosher. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The applicant requests approval of a preliminary plat for a 2-lot subdivision on 0.32 acres located at 1462 South Weideman Avenue in an MX2 zone. The subject property is located approximately 300 feet north of Overland Road and within a quarter mile east of the intersection of Overland and 5 Mile Road. In addition, is located within the Overland and 5 Mile Road Community Activity Center. The surrounding adjacent properties are comprised of retail, childcare, and office uses. This slide shows the site plan and the preliminary plat layout. In summary, the applicant requests approval of a preliminary plat for the Ziggy subdivision, which is a residential subdivision comprised of 2 buildable lots, which will be developed with 8 multifamily unit project. Basically, the project is includes a 4-plex on each lot, and a zoning certificate for this multifamily project has been approved. As proposed, all lots will meet the dimensional standards of the MX2 zone, and the subdivision will include cross-access shared parking agreements for the service drive, parking, bike parking areas, open space, and trash facilities. In addition, the front property line will be adjusted to accommodate the ACHD right-of-way dedication, which is to dedicate the property 2 feet behind the back of the sidewalk. A condition of approval requires installation of a 5-foot detached sidewalk, 8-foot landscape buffer with street trees along Wildman Avenue, abutting the site. I would also like to know that 2 conditions of approval need to be added in regards to the aviation easement, since the subject property is located in the airport influence area A. These 2 conditions are noted here on the slide. Basically, it's that aviation easement shall be recorded for the subject property and that the property should be soundproofed to an insulation to reduce noise levels of 25 decibels, which is straight out of our zoning code. And this will be noted on the plat. As in conclusion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval of the subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next up, we could hear from the applicant. Is the applicant here? Oh.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I've got a little planner with me today, but I don't think she wants to be. So apologies, I understand that some days. try to make it quick, as this hopefully is a very simple one for council. And then do we have the clicker? Yeah, I don't see one.
If not, let me know. I'll just forward.
Thank you, Dave. So, thank you again. My name is Joe Dodson. I'm the planner on the project, located at 1027 West 12th Street in Meridian. And as noted, the application before you tonight is for Ziggy Commons, a 2-lot residential subdivision. Next slide, please. Subject parcel is a 0.32 acre parcel, as noted, generally located near the intersection 5 Mile and Overland. There are a number of existing uses nearby, most of them directly adjacent, being non-residential, but there is residential to the north. The shopping center to the west includes an Albertsons. There's also a Montessori school, daycare, Jiffy Lube, Dairy Queen, and a Pizza Hut, all uses that future residents could walk to very easily and get a lot of their essentials. Next slide. Oh, there we go. As noted, zoning is MX2. Thank you. The comp plan is mixed use. We're not requesting any rezone or comp plan map amendment, so the zoning and use complies with that. There's just some contextual site photos showing what the existing site looks like today. And here's a overall mobility plan, just noting the existing overland arterials and then local streets of Wiedemann and the other ones to the north. The existing sidewalk everywhere, thankfully, so there's no issues there. And we have agreed to detach the existing sidewalk and do the 8-foot required landscape buffer. As far as on the site itself, as you can see, the red line would be pedestrian circulation, blue would be vehicular, and green would be the bicycle. And we're providing all of those avenues for connectivity. In addition, along 5 Mile and Overland both, there is an existing bus line, a VRT bus line. So there's also that ability for future residents. The preliminary plat, as noted, just 2 lots that complies with the zoning code. Nothing crazy, thankfully. This is just a zoomed in area for a colored landscape plan of what the parking in the first building would look like. And then an overall landscape plan depicting landscaping around the entire perimeter, as well as the required street trees and the parking lot landscaping. As far as parking, we are compliant with all off-street vehicle parking, as well as all off-street bicycle facilities, both short-term and long-term. As far as open space, we're utilizing the space between the buildings. It's a nice little corridor of shared area. There's going to be anticipation to have some seating and some plaza area in there, and it complies with the zoning code as well. I'll go through these fairly quickly, but these would be some of the floor plans that we've come up with so far. They vary between the buildings. And some exterior elevations. The building closest to Wiedemann is proposed as a 3-story building, with the first floor having a walkway and some additional windows to help activate that corridor, since it is a mixed-use zone. And just some other elevations there. And the back fourplex is proposed as 2 stories. They'll just transition to the existing 2-story structures to the east. I'll get to the pretty pictures next. So some renderings of what we're proposing there. Multiple material types. Good window fenestration. Thankfully, the design has already been approved by the administrative design review that we've had. And with that, as I said, we're just proposing a simple 2-lot subdivision for the purpose of constructing 2 fourplex buildings. The hope is to construct these buildings and both enhance while also integrating into the existing neighborhood. We hope to also use the housing to help cut into the known housing deficit that we have here in the valley. The proposed uses are allowed in the MX2 zone, so we're not asking for any deviations. We do agree with all conditions of approval, including the 2 additional ones that Mr. Moser has added. And with that, we will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from council for the applicant? Thank you so much. Or for staff, I have some stickers for you before you guys go sit down. Or for staff. And then next I would, do you want some stickers? Next I'll see if we have a representative here from the neighborhood association. That's the Southwest Ada No. Okay. Then with that, we'll move on to public testimony. I have Mr. Kingston signed up here for this project. Are you here for the ZOA? Yes. Thanks, Eric. Okay. Is there anybody else here to testify on this item? All right. Seeing none, then the item is before council and I'll close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve subdivision 25-00065 at 1462 South Weiderman Avenue, preliminary plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 2 buildable lots on 0.32 acres in an MX2-AIO zoning area, including the 2 additional conditions of approval mentioned earlier.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead. Yes. Council Pro Tem Corliss, and then over to Councilmember Nass.
Yeah, I just want to thank the applicant for bringing this forward. I know this area well, and this is a really great area to have more infill. I appreciate the maximized use of the space for the number of housing units we can have there. If you're lucky to move into this area, I can tell you you're a stone's throw away from Dairy Queen, which I think is the biggest benefit that I see. So thank you very much for bringing this forward with us tonight.
And my mistake is Councilmember Morales up next.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I also just wanted to commend the applicant. Thank you for this project. I think it looks great. And I also think it fulfills a goal we probably should have, which is more people within a 10-minute walk of Country Donuts, the Egyptian cuisine. So thank you.
Madam Mayor, yeah, I was going to bring up Country Donuts too, but when I was looking at this first, I was like, why is there such a large surface level parking lot? Because you can't really see the housing from the above view. And then when you get a chance to look at some of the other renderings, it's a pretty smart design for actually getting a lot onto a little bit of land and really maximizing the amount of housing that you can in there with parking underneath. So it's actually a pretty creative design. I haven't seen a ton of stuff like that come in front of us. And then you also have, it looks like a safe and secure bike parking area in there as well. So just kind of wanted to commend you all on a great infill project in an area where it makes sense. But the design itself is pretty cool for such a small area. Good job.
Okay, with that, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ross,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, now we're moving on to the public hearings. The first one is a unique one. The Boise City Council sits as the Board of Corrections to hear and correct assessments levied for operations and maintenance of the Boise City Municipal Irrigation System for the 2026 irrigation season. So first we'll hear from staff.
Chris. Awesome. Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. My name is John Gunnarsson. I am an engineer and project manager for our Public Works Department. This evening, we are here today to allow property owners that are served by our Boise Municipal Irrigation District an opportunity to express and correct any problems with their 2026 irrigation assessment. Quickly, I guess for a little more context, the Boise Municipal Irrigation District operates 7 systems that provide irrigation water to 14 subdivisions totaling 375 lots. In addition, we also manage 1 gravity irrigation lateral that provides surface water irrigation for an additional 29 properties. All of these irrigation facilities are located in West Boise over by Fairview and 5 Mile. We have 2 different assessment rates, one assessment rate for the pressurized irrigation systems and a separate assessment rate for the gravity system. This year for water year 26, the assessment rate for the pressurized system was established at $995 per acre. This is a 6.5% increase compared to last year. Separately, the assessment rate for the gravity lateral users is $140 per lot. And that is a 100% increase from last year and is needed to cover the cost of operation and maintenance to keep this lateral clear of obstructions and to keep the water flowing downhill to this small number of water users. Assessments were mailed out to these water users in February, and staff has not been notified, nor do we have any reason to believe that any errors have been made in the assessment. Typically, the irrigation water will become available here in mid-April and will last through generally mid-October. So next, per state code, City Council acts as our board of directors for the irrigation district. So tonight you are sitting as that board of directors to allow property owners the opportunity to dispute or share any concerns or errors in their assessment. So Madam Mayor, with your permission, the floor should now be open to anyone who feels that there's been an error in their 2026 assessment. And if nobody reports any errors, then I recommend that you formally note that no corrections are needed.
Do we have any members of the public here on this item or online? No, any questions from council? Councilmember Nash.
Been doing this for, it's my third, 23, 24, 20. My fourth year doing this. I don't know if you guys showed up yet, and I'd really like to see a show sometime. So if you could work on that, I appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, council member, this is my 16th year doing it, and I don't think anybody has shown up either. So I'm right there with you. I'm hoping somebody will show up one of these years.
I think that probably assumes really excellent work without errors. So I would like the record to reflect that. And please continue on to year 17.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next we are moving on to ZOA 25-13, which is the zoning ordinance amendment of Boise City Code Title 11. And I think we'll hear from Deanna as soon as she gets set up. We do have some members of the public signed up for this one. So we'll first hear from the city, and then council may ask questions, and then I'll start working through the public list that I have here. If you're not signed up in advance, no problem. I'll work through these folks first and then ask for anybody else that might be here to testify on it. Go ahead, Deanna.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm here today to present ZOA 2513, technical amendments to the Boise City Zoning Code and 6 policy edits. I'm also joined by Kyle Patterson, Director of Organizational Effectiveness, who could speak to our specific edit related to the housing incentives. As the application before you is a zoning ordinance amendment, the council is the final decision-making authority, and the approval criteria are shown on the screen. As background for the city-initiated zoning ordinance amendment, and to maximize our zoning framework and to align our zoning code with the goals we're trying to achieve for development within the city, we have brought forward 2 zoning ordinance amendments, or ZOAs, in the last year. The first was a ZOA to amend the appeal procedures for conditional use permits, and then a second was to address 140 necessary technical edits and the provision to allow tiny homes on wheels, all since the modern zoning code went into effect in late 2023. In addition, from 2024 to 2025, our team partnered with the Department of Organizational Effectiveness and the Mayor's Office to begin an evaluation of our zoning incentives. This included partnering with a consulting firm to conduct feasibility analysis, pro forma modeling, developer interviews, and engagement, all to come up with a proposal on how to refine our zoning incentives and ultimately come up with a red line draft, which is in your proposal today. In the last quarter of 2025, PDS staff have coordinated with City Council via memo, and we sent via memo on the next batch of technical amendments, and we received direction from the council to pursue 6 policy topics. In December of 2025, our PDS director, Maureen Brewer, received direction from council to move forward with our 3rd ZOA, which is what we're hearing tonight, which includes those technical edits and the policy topics. Before we dive too deep into the zoning ordinance amendment that you'll be making a decision on today, I do want to take a moment to recognize tonight's process is representative of a process we're hoping to move forward, which is how we review and refine our zoning code into the future. As we've discussed multiple times before, we want a zoning code that is responsive to real world concerns, unique challenges of developing within the city, and we want to be flexible as we approach those problems. In addition, we want the code to reflect our values as a city, but at the same time, it's challenging for our staff and our customers to always be working with an evolving code. And therefore, we have developed a consistent and predictable process in which we can be responsive, but also maintain a predictable approach to changes. So in order to do this, we're going to be operating on an annual cycle with an annual amendment process in which staff are continually reviewing the zoning ordinance and gearing up for the next cycle of edits. So as we wrap up this zoning ordinance amendment, we're already prepared to start the next. And this is beginning with research on projects that council has already directed us to look at. For example, we've received quite a bit of feedback on how to seek parity between single family homes and the plexes or other small scale neighborhood housing. So we'll be gearing up to conduct that research. And we appreciate council giving us more time to do that when we discussed it in the fall and winter. So with that, we plan to begin that research, and we'll be communicating with you through that pre-application process with the goal to bring the next batch of edits by the end of this year. So with that, I'll now review what's included in this amendment tonight, ZOA 2513, and this is very consistent with the presentation that Maureen gave in December. It includes the technical edits, and these correct formatting, provide clarification, amend the code to further align our goals with what's in the code, such as housing affordability, transportation choice, and sustainability. And then we have a lot of real world lived process improvements that we've included in those technical edits. All of these edits are itemized and have been attached to your project report. And additionally, we sent them to the council in the fall. The next part of the zoning ordinance amendment is our 6 policy topics, and I have a slide for each of these, but we'll be discussing electric vehicle or EV charging, bicycle parking, junior ADUs, permitting 2 ADUs or tiny homes on wheels for single family homes, the airport influence area B1, and zoning incentives. On EV charging, we've received quite a bit of feedback from our development community about kind of the level of EV parking requirement. And so with that, we are proposing to remove the requirement for all in development, but instead add it as part of the sustainability incentive. How this would work in practice is for projects that voluntarily opt to take advantage of our incentives. If they are using more than or if they're providing more than 20 vehicle parking spots, they would need to make 5% of them EV ready. Sorry, if you guys give me a second. Similar to EV parking, we've received quite a bit of feedback about our bicycle parking. So our proposal tonight, we hope, addresses that feedback while also holding up our goals for mobility. First is we're introducing alternative compliance for bike parking. This is something that we already do for landscaping, which essentially is a director determination to work, and it provides staff an administrative way to work with the developer to find solutions to ensure that the spirit of the code is met as it relates to design and location, even if they can't meet the letter of the code to the exact T. In addition, this is a process improvement, but we already have a process in our code that allows for permitted setback encroachments. So we're referring people, instead of a separate requirement within bike parking, just directing people to that same permitted encroachment section. Next, we looked at our required multifamily bike parking, and we received quite a bit of feedback for this. And we ended up looking at peer cities and seeing what cities like Salt Lake, Bend, Oregon, and Reno, Nevada require, and among others. And we looked and saw that 1 per unit is really that median requirement. And actually, when we went back to look at the original staff recommendation for the modern zoning code, this was consistent with 1 per unit. And then lastly, when working with applicants, we've seen that industrial buildings come in lots of different shapes and sizes and very different needs and unique needs for bike parking. So we've proposed to allow direct determination to figure out the right amount of bike parking for those unique buildings, really to address the customer and employee serving portion of the industrial building, because many are much larger than where people actually are in. The next edit has to do with creating more housing options. We've heard quite a bit from our community and from the council, the desire to allow kind of what sometimes is called a junior ADU. And how we looked into how to permit this. And what we are proposing is amending the definition of a single family home, attached or detached, to allow a second kitchen, which in effect would be like an in-suite in-law suite or in-unit in-law suite, as long as internal access is maintained. This provides more housing options, allowing for different family arrangements, and it helps to avoid some of the barriers that might be triggered had we not changed the code, because that requiring a second kitchen would trigger many building permit requirements. So as long as internal access is maintained, we can address those life safety requirements. Next, through our previous zoning ordinance process, we received direction from the council to permit 2 ADUs on a single lot. So this proposal seeks to do just that. Our edit actually permits 2 ADUs, 2 tiny homes on wheels, or a combination of both. So 1 ADU and 1 tiny homes on wheels, all accessory to a single family unit. And as Maureen mentioned this when she was giving the presentation in December, and as I alluded to earlier, when we really start to think about this, you're now allowing a single family home with 2 ADUs. You start to think through, well, what's the logic or the parity among a single family home with 2 ADUs and a triplex? And so we are hoping to continue to do some research and come back to council with a proposal that seeks to find parity and balance between regulations for all of these different housing types. Our next edit, this is something that we've learned through some practical experience, has to do with refining the airport influence area with the goal to provide predictability to our development community, as well as protecting and creating compatible uses adjacent to the airport. So what this edit does is going to remove the current provision to allow a developer to request a conditional use permit for additional density in any part of the B1 zone, but instead, what it will do is focus on noise contours or sound contours to determine the appropriate densities. So what's going on in this map, what is circled and in that tan color, we have the B1 zone, and the B1 zone is in 2 different areas across our city. The first is near Overland and Maple Grove, which is circled in purple, and the other part of the B1 zone is north of I-84. And the yellow line is the 60 DNL sound contour. So our proposal is in the purple area where there is less sound impact, you would have a permitted base density up to 25 units per acre. And in the red circle, where you have a greater sound impact, you're within the 60 DNL, you're limited to 5 units per acre, which is more appropriate for how the sound impact. And our last policy edit is related to the housing incentives. And as I mentioned, PDS has been working with the mayor's office and the Department of Organizational Effectiveness for quite some time. And Kyle Patterson is here to answer any specific questions. But ultimately, this policy seeks to optimize one of the few tools the city has to unlock affordability or sustainability to meet the current needs of Boise residents. We know housing supply is part of the solution, but we also know planning is a long-term game. And affordability incentives help us support that attainable housing now and make sure it stays affordable into the future. Our proposal is pretty much the same as what you saw in the summer of 2025 and then what you saw again in December of 2025. We're proposing the simplified menu approach in which there's flexibility where if you are opting to use the incentive, a developer or applicant gets to pick from a menu, each with an assigned point value to get flexibilities, and then they need to earn those points by providing affordable or sustainable housing. With this, there are some changes about the right size of affordability requirements. We've increased the AMI, reduced the number of units, but extended the term of affordability. All of this has been informed by our pro forma analysis and conversations with developers with the goal of getting usage of the incentives. We learned that we were requiring too much and not giving enough, so we had to right size that. And with this last piece of expanding the incentive options, we had to offer more things to get folks to be engaged with the incentives. And then, as I talked about, because we are making policy policy edits related to bike parking and EV parking, we needed to change that within our proposal for the zoning incentives. I shared the same presentation to the Planning and Zoning Commission on February 2nd and received unanimous recommendation of approval from the commission. There was some conversation about reducing or eliminating parking requirements altogether. And then we did have some questions from commissioners about the incentives and the higher AMI levels. We had 10 folks come to testify on behalf of the zoning ordinance amendment. Generally, we received support, but with a little bit of advocacy to kind of go further to reduce parking, streamline housing, really move us forward as it comes to housing supply. And then we had some small concerns with our technical edits, and we were able to address those. We have received quite a bit of written public comment, and as I said, similar to what the public testimony was, generally they're supportive while pinpointing some very specific issues to help remove perceived barriers to housing production. So with that, the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval, and the motion needed is a decision on the zoning ordinance amendment. Myself or Kyle will be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Deanna. Do we have any questions for staff at this time? Okay.
Oh, yeah. One quick question on the ADUs, Deanna, and the addition for the kitchen, which I think is a great idea. Is this, if I recall correctly, this is only when there's full interior access is maintained. So if there's a unit attached, does that allow for that same second kitchen? So if they share a wall, but there's no access in between, does that also allow for a shared kitchen?
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem.
Or I mean, a second kitchen. Sorry, not shared kitchen. Thank you.
Yeah, tracking. So if they do not have internal access, we would classify that as a separate unit, which would then come with building requirements and additional requirements for parking, et cetera. As long as internal access is maintained, it's operating as an in-unit in-law suite, and that's the junior ADU definition.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Morales.
Yeah, I think I have a question for Kyle. We got some written comment, and I'm just curious kind of your thoughts on our affordability incentives, and if you feel that kind of this current menu can be applied by like a wide range of developers. So some of the comments we got were from smaller, maybe more incremental infill developers. Do you think the affordability incentives, as we're modifying them, may be able to help a little bit more, or do you think that it's kind of designed for bigger developers that are kind of managing more complex capital stacks and that kind of thing?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, council members, great question. Thank you for asking. As part of our work to develop the proposed incentives that we have in front of you, we interviewed a number of developers, both large scale and small scale developers, affordable developers, and market rate developers all across the board. And everybody we talked to agreed that universally that this is an improvement over our current zoning incentives. So I have no doubt that regardless of the development type, whether it's small or large, this will have an impact. We also did integrate the comments from several infill developers on ways that we can add incentives to this menu that would really benefit them. I think there was one around parking setbacks that we added as a result of this. Another big request was that we sort of streamlined how we define affordability from being based on that size of the household to the number of units. So we really did try very hard to listen to different types of developers and integrate their feedback. And again, we heard universally that this was an improvement over the last one.
I have a quick question on incentives while you're up there, Kyle.
Yes.
For a developer or resident who wants to take advantage of those incentives, is there any I guess, do you have any information on how long that process takes administratively? Is it any different than if they were not using the incentives? Does it, I don't need like days or specifics, but just high level.
Yes, and I might defer to Deanna. I don't expect any time difference in the application process. In fact, we're working on developing a web-based tool, if you all approve, to make it easier for folks to understand what they can access. And I imagine the planner working directly with the developer to talk through what's available to you and what that looks like, and that would be part of your typical application. Is that correct, Deanna?
Madam Mayor, just one other question. I know we also received a lot of comments on sidewalks. Is this something that the city is looking at maybe to look into for a future review of the zoning code?
Madam Mayor and council members, yes, we have received lots of comments about sidewalk, and a few things in this zoning ordinance amendment that do address some questions around that. One is in the incentives, we actually offer an option to maintain the existing attached sidewalk, which is something a lot of our infill developers want to do. So we're creating that as an incentive option in exchange for affordability or sustainability. We also, and this is something that came up during planning and zoning, we have heard quite a bit that we have ACHD projects that are programmed and in the pipeline to be constructed, and we are still requiring roadway improvements of those developments. So we have created an option to have a developer be able to hold on creating that sidewalk improvement if it's programmed in ACHD's 5-year work plan. But we are getting a lot of feedback on sidewalks. Just how do we approach it with the limited tools we have to get mobility infrastructure, and that playing a really important role within our city. For us, we see detached sidewalk as a critical way to get the street trees we need to meet climate goals. So it's definitely a trade-off. Planning and Zoning Commission brought up fee in lieu for sidewalks. So lots of different strategies we could see on how to balance competing goals here.
Great, thank you.
I just have one more question so one of the things that kind of piqued my interest was the recommendation to move from the 60% AMI to 80% AMI in the affordable housing incentive. I can understand, though, if we're not seeing any bites at 60%, that maybe if we saw some at 80%, that's better than nothing. But is there anything and I know this isn't your department necessarily, Kyle, but is there anything you can say to what the city is working on to reach that lower AMI resident and fit those needs for people that should have the opportunity to live here?
Madam Mayor, council members, great question. I think I speak for the whole project team of staff who's working on this. We worked really hard to try and find a way to get to 60% area median income with these incentives, but the math just didn't add up, right? It's, as you know well, right, we need the value of what we're offering to be greater than the cost of what we're requiring. The cost of going from 80% to 60% is just really, really costly. We just didn't have the incentives to bridge that gap. But we have had really successful strategies in place to reach that through financial incentives. So through things like gap financing, fee deferrals, fee waivers, our housing land trust, we've been really successful at getting units of that 60% area median income level. And I'd add that while we're not requiring 60% AMI for the incentives, this is still a really valuable tool for those developers who are getting those financial incentives and willing to do the 60% AMI. This really just adds to that sort of stack of incentives they're receiving.
Thanks, Kyle. Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, Councilmember Nash.
Well, just while we're on the subject, I would just flag for council the things that Kyle said about this and about 60 and 80 and conditions that we may have imposed in the past related to that, and keeping that in mind as we consider conditions related to affordability in the future, just what this analysis has shown.
Okay, I think if there are no other questions for staff at this time, are there representatives from the neighborhood associations here? Anybody? Okay. Okay, great. Then with that, we'll move into public testimony. First up, I have Janessa, and then Bud, and then Ian. Just so everybody knows who who's up. Janessa, Bud, Ian, Mike, Greg, and then Eric. So stay alert. Hi, Janessa, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council members. I'm Janessa Chastain here representing Treasure Valley Habitat for Humanity. Affordable housing is sort of what I live and breathe. And I just want to start by saying thank you so much for the zoning code rewrite as we look at the cities that are facing rapidly changing housing affordability. The thing that trips cities up the most is an unwillingness to look at their zoning codes and just build more houses. And so I'm so grateful for the work that everyone has done. It has been transformational. I have the privilege, I guess, of being an early affordable housing project that was moving through the new zoning code. And so we got to see some of the great advantages of it and got tripped up on some of the things that we are all working to fix. So I wanted to speak a little bit to that. The first is just to talk about my experience with the detached sidewalks with buffers. When we started looking at the plot of land we have at Maple Grove and Victory, we, under the old zoning code, would have been lucky to get 3 houses on there. With the new zoning code, we calculated we could be looking at 6 optimistically, 5 realistically. But when the requirements for the detached zoning code, the buffer, the setbacks that didn't include or that excluded the driveway, and then an additional need for a turnaround for public waste trucks, we went down to 4 houses. That changes the ability for this to be affordable. Our projects never pencil with Habitat for Humanity. That's not really our goal. It pencils because we have community members that support our work. But this makes it so that we almost had to walk away from it. And so putting in some of those restrictions not just reduced the number of houses we could build, but added about $25,000 to the project between the increase in concrete, that work that needed to be done, and then having to redraw the proposals multiple times, being sent back for different or opposing comment multiple times. A lot of this is just as the different departments work out what the new zoning code looks like, but it definitely, for us, has significant restrictions. The last thing that I wanted to speak to was the 50-year period of affordability. I actually am concerned about that being a requirement for affordability. We at Habitat believe in perpetual affordable housing, but we also believe in the power of homeownership to change families for generations. For houses to be inheritable, for houses to be a source of wealth generation, for people to be able to take loans against something as stable as a house. And doing a 50-year period of affordability creates a different class of homeowner. And I worry about the way in which that signal pulls out our low-income homeowners as a separate class of homeowner for not just one generation, but maybe 2 generations of homeowners. I don't think we have clarity enough around things like inheritability along with that. And so I am concerned about extending it to that degree and the way that it impacts what homeownership can do for families.
Thank you so much, Janessa. And I forgot to ask, would you mind please just stating your address for the record?
Oh, it's 3378 North 39th Street.
Thank you. Thank you so much
Madam
for
Mayor.
your perspective. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Councilmember.
Janessa, thank you so much for all of your work. Appreciate you being back here with us. I believe, and I just wanted to hear from you, maybe clarify that when you've been before us talking about trying to find properties in Boise to do Habitat for Your Humanity homes, that it's been pretty difficult. And I forget how many you were maybe able to do recently. So can you talk about what that was looking like and maybe what this change is doing for your ability to develop more homes here in Boise?
Yeah, I mean, I think pre-zoning code, when we were looking at spending, $300,000 on a piece of land in order to only get 2 to 3 houses out of it, that really meant that we just could not continue to develop land in Boise, which doesn't mean we could never build another house in Boise, but it changes what it looks like for us pretty significantly. With the new zoning code, it does bring us sort of back to staying in Boise more often. With some of the barriers we run into with this specific project, I think we're sort of back to maybe not developing in Boise. For us, those margins are just so tight. We are serving the lowest income homeowners, I think, of any of the developers. And so not all of that is necessarily on the burden of the city to fix. I don't know that the city needs to specify for habitat specifically, but I think some of those barriers are going to also prevent for higher income incentives for affordable homeownership as well. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, Janessa, thank you so much for being out here. Big fan of Habitat for Humanity, and thank you for all your work. Just want to clarify a couple of comments. When you talked about specifically this project at Maple Grove and Victory and talked about the detached sidewalks, would you say, I heard two concerns. One was on the space that it would take, reducing then the number of homes that could be built, and also on the size of the sidewalk, then being a constraint on the cost of the concrete and the materials. Is that correct? And then is there one or the other that was more of a constraint there?
Yes, that is correct. I think it was probably the cost is more of a constraint. With the size. It was sort of a death by a thousand cuts situation. There was just a bunch of little things that chipped away that then reduced us from 5 houses to 4. The sidewalks being one of them, but if it was just that alone, we may have been able to still get the 5 houses in. But the cost was a significant barrier for us. Yeah.
Follow up, Madam Mayor, and just one other thought is, as we looked at GC, we have approved ADUs and now tiny homes on wheels. Has Habitat for Humanity looked at that, where it's only 4 homes, but also adding tiny homes on wheels to those?
It's something we're always in conversation about. The population that we have tended to serve, so most of the families that we are building houses for are going to be best served by a single family home. Traditionally, throughout Habitat's history, about 80% of the houses we built are for refugee families. That is not necessarily like a policy decision on our side, but that is who sort of fits into the requirements of our program. And those do not tend to be small families. That tends to be multi-generational. We're looking at 3 generations living in a house together. And so an ADU doesn't really fit the population we serve in particular. But as we are able to expand and sort of look at new construction opportunities, building ADUs, doing smaller developments for, single parents with 1 or 2 kids would make a lot more sense.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Janessa.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Bud, and then Ian after Bud. Bud, please start with your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes. Great to see you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Bud Comfer, and I have the privilege of working for NeighborWorks Boise, located at 8825 Vic Lane in Middleton, Idaho. At least I am, not NeighborWorks. Sorry, they're in Boise, by the way. I just wanted to thank the staff and just the commitment that all of you have made to really keep this up and to keep this is a difficult conversation. Zoning is always one of those that it's hard to always continue to refine. And I would just like to share maybe 2 comments. One probably shouldn't be a surprise given already the conversation around sidewalks and detached. 100% agree with the value of those detached sidewalks in high traffic areas. Would love to think about options in more close-knit communities because it does. Here we are lowering the size of our lots, pushing our homes back with additional side space or front space for that sidewalk to set back, and realize that as a part of the conversation here. But NeighborWorks does participate in some of the incentives, and have found them very helpful, specifically deferring costs to the C of O. And so just in one of our projects, one of our pocket neighborhoods located on the corner of Cole and Fairview here in Boise, we have 2 5-plexes, so it's about average of 10,000 per. So it's about $100,000 we've been able to defer until the time we hit C of O. And so if I'm not, I would much rather pay you, but not have to pay the bank for holding that $100,000 for 5 months. So that there is some value in that incentive. One other just thought specific to the MX zoning, some of the contributions we've been working with a local church to review. This is an MX zoning, However, as we started working through that process, realized that detached homes in a mixed use zoning isn't allowed. Would like to maybe consider allowing a variety of housing types in MX, both attached and detached. Those are really the two things that I felt were important that I hope that would be valuable for you to hear. But am very grateful for the time that you spend and the contribution to our community that you do as we revisit these conversations. And so that's all I have. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Next, Ian, come on up. Ian, please start with your name and address, and you'll have up to 3 minutes.
Ian Bott, address is 2260 Harrison Boulevard, 208 83702 Boise. And the reason why I'm supporting this is because I think there needs to be more avenues for people to live. At this point, we almost have more renters than homes, and we need to have ways to take care of that disparity. And there needs to be an easier path towards getting housing. And I think that having more availability for places would be able to do that, and people aren't having to look at 27 different places to rent 2 different places as a finalization like I did for my previous places. And I think that there also needs to be, and I'm in favor of the zoning as well, because I think it'll make more avenues for low-income housing and people not having to be on the list for quite a while and calling every few months for a number of years. And I think that we have more options. We have more availability for not just families, but for single renters. And I think that we're small or people who decide that they want other avenues for living. And I'm glad that we have more options, and I think we all like options, and that we need to continue to see other ways of getting housing availability for everyone involved, not just the people who have the most influx of money, and give people who want to rent a way to have zoning to where they can rent and not have to pay 3 times as much for rent. So anyway, that's what I have, and I'm definitely in favor of this. I'm definitely in favor of continuing to have excellent amounts of renters availability. And I think expanding is a great idea, because there's so many people that wouldn't have housing otherwise if we didn't have this zoning be a thing for the public. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian. Okay, next we've got Mike, and then Greg, and then Eric.
Hi, my name is Mike DiVittorio. I live in Boise, 925 Park Hill Court. I develop new infill housing in Southeast Boise. I've done duplexes, triplexes, houses. I've done a subdivision. I provide input to the city on the affordability incentives. So I'm deeply steeped in the process. My comments will focus mostly on infill housing segment and the need for further changes in the code to enable developers to deliver housing diversity at lower price points in existing neighborhoods. To begin, I'd like to register support for the efforts to update the zoning code, especially the reduction in lot sizes, minimums, and for ADUs by right and the junior ADUs. Unfortunately, however, our modern zoning code remains out of touch with the economics of the current housing market and the needs of our community. 50 years ago, Boise had ample land, and the builder community was delivering modest homes that were affordable to 3/4 of would-be buyers. The framework for our existing code was developed with mass affordability as the backdrop. Now, the opposite is true, with median price for a new home in Boise at about $600,000, which is unaffordable for 4 and 5 would-be buyers. Home sizes have grown by more than 50%, and homes are now far more expensive relative to household incomes. The development community has been able to add more lots by building new roads and subdivisions further out, but there are relatively few new lots close into the city center where the infrastructure exists and where so many people would prefer to live. As an infill developer, I can say that there are virtually no vacant lots on which to build in established neighborhoods where the community has the greatest demand and infrastructure in place. There's a mere handful of infill lots with prices starting at $250,000. We can't build affordable homes on lots priced like these. I can tell you from experience that creating an infill subdivision to add several lots is risky, time-consuming, frustrating, and expensive. I'll never do it again using the existing code, and that's a real problem for the future of our city. The existing code makes it virtually impossible for a developer to create smaller, less expensive housing types in existing neighborhoods. The affordability incentives will help that a bit. Code-driven barriers to infill housing diversity include minimum lot sizes, setbacks, height restrictions, parking minimums, expensive requirements to improve ACHD or other public property, and pushback from wary neighbors. These barriers force developers to build larger, more expensive homes in neighborhoods already saturated with large, expensive homes, because that's all that will pencil. Our zoning code should be modified to stimulate housing type and price diversity in existing neighborhoods. Instead of pushing developers to build one 3,200 square foot home on an infill lot with a retail price of $1 million, why not allow the developer to build 4 800 square foot units on the same lot with a retail price of $250,000 each?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Nash.
Mike, could you, if you magic wand, you had 2, 3, 4 things that you would change the code that you think would make the biggest impact on the types of development that you think is preventing this from us having more affordability? Like, because when you're talking, I don't think we're misaligned on goals.
Right.
We may not know exactly how to do this, but I'd love to hear top few things that you think would make the most impact.
Well, my punchline was going to be, we need to figure out how to get lot prices for beginning at, and when I say lot prices, I mean the price for a footprint for a home. That could be in a plex, or it could be on an individually deeded lot. But if we can get those down to 25,000, and my wife told me I was going to be laughed at if I said that, but that's really,
we may not know enough about real estate to even laugh at you that much, but I can tell you I've never seen one.
I can tell you that 20 years ago you could find them, and you can't find them now. And so we need to figure out how to remove the barriers, and I'll get to answer your question, to the level that we can actually entertain a single family home for $25,000. Because if you can get that lot for $25,000, builder math says 4 to 5 times that lot price is what you're
understand that problem.
Right?
So if we bring it back to what can we do? Because I would love to be able to move that lever to reduce lot prices, but I don't know what that is. What do you think we can do?
So I would say it depends on where you're building, but if you're building in an established neighborhood that has no sidewalks, a sidewalk is going to cost you $500 a foot times 50 feet. So that's 25,000 right there. So you can put that in your calculation. If you have a corner lot, your side street setback is 15 feet. If it's a 50 foot wide lot that eats, 15 out of 50, that's the 30% of your lot. Then if you have an alley, so setbacks are a huge deal. Setbacks, sidewalks, those are the biggest. And then also lot density. So how many units can you fit on a lot? So I say minimum, if you could reduce the minimum lot size to 2,000 square feet, that would also help.
Do you have any policy suggestions on, I don't want to impose the sidewalk requirements to make it more painful to build housing. We want it because we don't have a lot of means to build sidewalks otherwise. And regarding the setbacks, first of all, policy suggestions on how we get sidewalks in places if we don't impose that requirement, because public wants that. And then second, on the setbacks, can you point to other jurisdictions that have changed their setbacks and still met other public safety goals within their code?
Well, first I would ask, so to answer the question about sidewalks, I develop in places where I am required to put a sidewalk where it attaches to no other sidewalk because they're not on the street. So I've offered to put money into a kitty so that we can finish one complete sidewalk someplace else nearby, because it's a waste of money for me to put a sidewalk to nowhere that goes right into a neighbor's fence. So that's been a bit of a frustration, and it's just a waste of money that impedes development. So I believe that we should be improving the neighborhood, but I pay taxes on the places that I own, and those taxes should go to ACHD to improve that. So that's sort of a who's responsible for it kind of thing, right? What was the other question you had?
Can you point to any other jurisdictions that have changed their setbacks, still met their public safety and other goals related to that? Is there a jurisdiction you could point to with different setbacks that might be more in line with what you're talking about?
Well, I would ask city staff what the requirements for a 15-foot side street setback on a corner are. And I, it's mostly maintenance of streetscape is my understanding. So it has nothing to do with safety, has more to do with sort of adhering to the old code sort of construct. And I think that that's something that we should really revisit. I was involved in helping rewrite the duplex zoning code. We allowed for houses or the duplexes to move up to the 10-foot setback as long as you put a front porch on that was at least 5 feet deep. And so there's examples in our own code that allow for diversions from the setback requirements. So parking also is a huge issue.
Well, my question to you would be, how do we balance, my part of town, very concerned about parking. It's far more car dependent than if you live downtown. I would tend to agree with you that these parking requirements are imposing higher expenses. But I mean, my wife was just at a church event the other day where people forgot that I was on city council and were just complaining about the lack of parking on a recent apartment development. So what is your recommendation for balancing the interest and needs of people that are in a very car dependent city with the costs that it's imposing on new development?
Well, so first of all, most parking in new subdivisions there is on-site parking on the private property. So when we talk about parking programming, you're talking about competing for spots in the public right of way, right? So if we wave our magic wand and you're no longer grandfathered into the garage that's right on the alley, and you don't park your car on your property, but you rely on the public right of way, you kind of is your ability to park conveniently in front of your house, does that outweigh the inconvenience of somebody who's buying a home in Cuna because they can't afford a home in Boise? I mean, that's the calculus.
Where do I put all my stuff?
Yeah. Sorry, are there any more questions?
Thank you so much. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Mike, in your written comments, you also talked about maximum heights to 5 stories. Can you talk about how that plays a factor into your calculus here, the math that you're bringing to us here?
Well, so I've been pilloried for building a 2-story house next to somebody who's in a 1-story house or a duplex. And so you need to ask yourself, is that person's right to, not be peered, have somebody not peering at our house worth, again, that person that might have to drive out to Cuna to buy a home? Probably not. How did I arrive at 5 stories? It's generally very few people are going to build 5-story places in infill neighborhoods, but there may be a place where it makes sense, and let a developer choose that place. Likewise, on the parking front, let a developer choose whether he's going to park it or not. If people don't like the property because it's unparked, then guess what? You have to lower the rent until somebody moves in. And finally, you get somebody where the trade-off is right and the price is right. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate your willingness to stand the questioning.
Okay. All right. I guess I won't finish my comments soon.
Madam Mayor, he might not know he's out of time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Next, we have Greg Olson and then Eric Kingston. Hi, Greg. Welcome. Please don't forget your name and address when you start.
Council President, council members. My name's Greg Olson. I'm at 8399 West Hill Road. My neighbors and I have 8/10 of an acre of a field in the back of my house. That would still leave me with a large yard. And we were looking at subdividing this field. And actually, a lot of our neighbors are doing this as well. And due to the time, I'm going to bullet point because I seem to be talking on a theme. So basically, flexibility is really what I want to point out is going to get us through these problems. I consider that we do more than one ADU for people that are able to do more than one, or more than two. The attached sidewalk versus the 5-foot offset was a big problem for us as well. It just eats up a lot of space and tacks a lot of costs onto the whole problem. And for private people like me that are trying to develop my own land, those costs add up quick. And they're going to be my neighbors, so I want it to be a nice neighborhood, but I was going to do tiny houses. We have a lot of established trees. I don't know that you need a 5-foot offset with a bunch of greenery when the neighborhood is already mostly a lot of greenery. I'm very pro EV. I would like to say and I've been in the industry for more than 20 years. This is a little bit of an aside, but I think EV charging should be considered a little more broadly, where you have a 50 amp 240 outlet that's watertight out at the place where this person would be parking and charging, or 120 volt outlet, and don't make it some specific lockdown J1772 type of a connection. Flexibility, but give people the ability to bring their own charger in their trunk and be able to charge in, let's say, this standard changes in a couple years, which it already has a couple times. Give people the power and let them decide what it needs to be connected to. So don't lock that down. There's a lot of properties, including mine, that's stranded. At present, there's a spur road that is probably going to be coming in as soon as the neighbors next to me start developing, and they already have approvals to do that development. But I have looked at myself. I've talked to multiple builders. One of the problems with me being a stranded property is I can't do a trust of some format to allow a builder to build up a portfolio of properties that they can build over time and basically move their team from one location to the next and have these properties locked down.
Thank you.
So,
That's the end of your
allow
time. If you
that.
have just another sentence,
Yeah.
wrap it up. Thank you. Great. Thank you so much, that was Greg. Thank you. Next we have Eric Olson. Eric Kingston. That was Greg Olson. After that, it'll just be up for grabs. So I'll make a call to see who we still have left to testify on this. Hi, Eric. Welcome.
Hi, Madam Mayor, Council. First of all, I think you guys are on the right track. I mean, I really do. And my background, a lot of people know that I'm a kind of a wind-up toy when it comes to talking about housing. So I'll try and keep it brief. But my background is about 3 decades at Idaho Housing, setting up a housing information referral center and a housing hotline, hearing from approximately 30,000 people from around Idaho over that time. And probably half of them are from Southwest Idaho, and a lot of them were from Ada County. One of the biggest problems that people faced was that rising housing cost, due to a lot of different things. There were a lot of factors involved in that. But one of them was, outside investors coming in and buying up housing, the housing stock, and then jacking up the rents. And those are the people I heard from a lot. A lot of them were retirees, older folks, mostly women, folks with disabilities, who had somebody buy the house they were in and jack up the rents. One of the ways we kind of can address that is what you're trying to do now. And that is make it easier to build more housing, more diverse housing types and price points that are distributed across neighborhoods distributed across zip codes in the city. And what that does is, you know, the more housing you can get online, you start to create competition for tenants. And that's one of the things that's really required to not only reduce rents to an extent. It's a kind of a roughly supply and demand issue that's not the same as, you know, corn or oil or soybeans, but you kind of get the idea. And when you have that competition for tenants, landlords are going to reduce the rents and they're going to treat people more fairly. So the other thing that you get when you distribute those types and price points across geography is you create social mobility for the people who move in. So especially kids, you know, when kids grow up in a mixed income, you know, house neighborhood, you know, they're going to interface with people from different backgrounds. So are the parents. So it creates more economic opportunities for everybody involved. So I think, you know, what I've seen the city doing in the last several years makes me really proud to be from Boise. And when I go out and present at conferences, I was just in Denver at the Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute, and I was able to present there a couple of years ago with Jessica Zelag about Boise's modern zoning code rewrite. And people were so jacked to see this because that's a problem that they all struggle with. And they saw a community passing an ordinance to legalize that diversity and that density that is what everybody's striving for around the Intermountain West. And, you know, so now I'm proud to go back there and say, I'm from Boise, because everybody remembers that. You know, we had close to a standing ovation in that room talking about that. So I would say, you know, the things that I'm really happy about with this, and I encourage you to kind of pass the proposed ordinance here, is a lot of the alley loaded homes, the compact, you know, development forms, ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, moreplexes. You know, we have those all over the East End. Oh, I forgot to tell you where I live.
Thanks, Eric. Tell me your address, please.
1010 East Jefferson.
Perfect. And then one more sentence to wrap up.
Bought the house in 1995 for 95 grand. Couldn't afford to live there now. Anyway, so I love the fact that, you know, we're looking at promoting those alley loaded properties where you already have existing infrastructure, which helps, you know, lower the cost of development. And I just want to say a shout out to all my favorite folks here, Habitat, NeighborWorks, great comments by Ian. Just really happy to hear all the support.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback.
Okay, thanks. Oh, questions?
I don't think so. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else? Oh, help yourself. Is there anybody else here to testify tonight? Great. We're going to after. How about first and then second? And then do we have any hands up online? Okay, great. We'll get to that after we finish everybody in the room here.
I thought I signed up online, but maybe not. Okay, Madam Mayor tonight?
For tonight, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And please start with your name.
Council, I'm Jamie Soma, 4247 East Arbor Vitae Court, Southeast Boise. Yeah, so been here for about 7 years. Kids, I love the city's vision of a city for everyone. Really bought into that idea. And so I'm especially thinking about the folks who are not able to be here. So I think about my kids, their generation, their friends that are looking at economic opportunities kind of slipping away, thinking they're going to be in a, you know, paying some out of town landlord, corporate landlord through an app, all of their money, right, for rent. I'm thinking about elders in our communities that are feeling a little bit not sure what to do because even though they're in a home, they not quite sustainable for them, and selling and buying somewhere else is a bit of a continuous proposition. And so I think that you know, we still have challenges. I'm proud also that Boise's taken a lot of steps in the modern zoning code. I'm glad that we're continually looking to revise it. I would say I think the thing that's probably we probably all realize at some level is that it can't be done fast enough. I think flexibility, the theme of flexibility. We could make it a song, we could make it a meme, Supertramp, if there's any Supertramp fans here. Flexibility, flexibility, seriously. The decades of old zoning code, restrictive stuff has shaped our housing crisis to what it is today. We can pat ourselves on the back that, hey, we're going in the right direction, but at the end of the day, it's not making enough of an impact. We're not doing enough. So I want to challenge City Council and the Mayor's office to pass this, but not sit back and take a breather. We've got a lot more work to do. And so I don't think it's really enough. Even if we had the maximum flexibility, I don't think it would be sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. Wiping out the diversity of our developer ecosystem, small incremental developers, through decades of overregulation, that's got to be undone. We need to re-inoculate and nurture a more broad, diverse ecosystem of developers. The City Council, the Mayor's office, I want to challenge you guys to, in addition to getting drastically flexible on the zoning code, launch a Boise incremental developer incubator. There would be developers out here that want to develop a property. We need to get out of their way. We need to also help them kind of get back in the game.
Thank you so much for that feedback. I think, Deanna, I know that we're working with this ULI partnership. I thought of when he said the developer incubator. Can you speak to that just for a second to kind of give us, so my understanding is that we're partnering with ULI to kind of workshop different properties around the city to figure out why they can't build what they would like to be building. And I think that kind of plays into what it's maybe could be like the cottage village or the, like, what are we, am I on the right track with that? And can you provide any more context?
Yep, Madam Mayor, exactly. And I have it on this slide too, if we want to show my screen. We're really excited about this, and we agree that you can't just pass the zoning code. We want to support implementation efforts. And we have an urban designer on staff who's been leading a lot of this work, Kayla Duclos. We're excited. We're very soon launching, and we'll announce this, pre-approved ADU plans. We have 8 pre-approved ADU plans with the goal to, they already have building permit approval. So you'll be able to save thousands of dollars for residents to move through ADU approval. And then exactly what you were speaking about, Madam Mayor, it's called the Community Design Lab for Neighborhood Housing. And we've been partnering with ULI, which is essentially a public design competition where we're hoping to activate small scale local developers to show innovative designs for 3 to 12 unit housing projects. We picked 4 sites across the city. And what's really critical about this is we're allowing developers to challenge our zoning regulations, and that's going to help inform future zoning ordinance, the next zoning ordinance amendment, to help reduce those barriers. So we know things are hard in our code, and we carried over a lot of things from the old code, deleted a lot of things. So we want to see real life examples on how we can maintain neighborhood affordability, livability, make sure that they're well designed and fit into existing neighborhoods. And this will all be announced at the ULI Housing Week. We have 2 events. One is Backyard Solutions, Big and Tiny, where we'll be talking about ADUs and tiny homes on wheels, and then the Design Lab Awards.
Thank you so much, Deanna. I thought it was relevant, and I agree, I agree with a lot of what you said. And we have such amazing creative staff that's always looking for solutions. And I thought that was a relevant piece of information that I meant to ask about during our staff questions. So Deanna, I appreciate you coming in on that.
Can we make sure that we get the schedule for when that's going to happen so that I can?
Yes, staff can definitely provide you more information about that.
Madam
Councilmember
Mayor.
Morales.
Jamie, thanks for being here again. Appreciated your testimony at Planning and Zoning too. And I feel bad as a neighbor keeping you standing up here, but I did want to just dial in more into your incremental developer incubator comments and understanding kind of the labor and talent and develop, these small scale developers. That gap maybe even exists from like the 2008s. And we're seeing like this gap in people in this space to be able to even build. I just want to dial into that a little bit more. See if you have any ideas. Recently learned about the Incremental Development Alliance, and then trying to kind of nurture and teach people that want to get in the space. Are you familiar with that locally? Is there kind of a club already? Are you asking us to create a group? Like,
Yeah,
what?
I think that,
Okay, great.
I think that's kind of that's the ask is let's work together to help host and spawn that kind of a program. There's examples around the country of cities that are doing just that. So there's a range of kind of a spectrum of ways to move in that direction. I would suggest erring on the side of like jumping in with both feet, and not tiptoeing in because of the time impact of these diverse impacts on creating diverse classes in our community.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the comments. Roberta, I think you're up next. And is there anybody else here? Can I see? Great. One more. Is that it? Just one more before we move online? Great. You'll be next. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, council members, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to comment tonight. My name is Roberta D'Amico. I'm speaking for myself. I've lived in Boise for 26 years in the same house, 3109 South Crossfield Way in Boise. I've moved around the country. I've lived in urban, suburban, rural, all different types of housing. And I know how lucky I am to be in the house that I'm in now. And that if I moved here today, I wouldn't be able to afford it. And that's why in 2020, I knew I was interested in the housing issues, not so much for me, but for those who are going to come after me. So I volunteered to be on the rewrite of the zoning code. I learned a lot. And I've been following the continued development of the modern zoning code since then. And the thing I'm really pleased about is to see that it's still a dynamic document. And that's why I'm here tonight, is I'm very happy to see that and some of the changes that are being proposed to continue to build more housing stock in the Valley. My takeaway from that time then and now is, as we all know, zoning is really complicated. It's really hard to get everything that we need, but we've made some great improvements, and I hope we continue to go that way. As a side note, zoning is complicated, and I discovered the illustrated zoning guide at my community library, which is really fun because it makes it a little easier. So kudos for that. Back to topic. My interest today is the same as it was in 2020, is that I want to support policies that expand housing supplies via the various incentives and ideas that have been presented tonight by others and much more elegantly that I can. I will walk away from this meeting tonight to go back and learn more about our sidewalk issues because I am a walker and sidewalks are really, as we get busier and busier. So I will do that for the next time around. And it's really good to see how much change we have had to improve this, because I do think that Boise can be an example for other communities. And because this housing crisis is not limited to Boise by far. So in closing, thanks. See you the next time.
Thank you so much, Roberta. I appreciate it. Please come on up. And then we'll move to our online testimony. Thank you.
Hi there, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Armand Detali. I'm on 3285 South Sutton Avenue. I grew up in this great city. I've been here for 25 years. I hope to stay for 25 more. I grew up during a period when Boise was experiencing some rapid growth, and because people saw what we had to offer, and it was amazing. But now I'm scared, frankly, because I'm 25. A lot of people are telling me, why aren't you buying a house? And I'm seeing prices on Zillow saying you need to have $1 million, and a lack of starter homes for my generation. And most of my friends are having to live with their families because it's the only financially viable option for them. And so I'm in favor of these zoning amendments, of course, and I just want to make sure that we are giving back to the city. We are here. We are working at places like Micron, St. Luke's, and among other places. And sorry, I don't want to have to leave this city just to go to another state or city with a lower quality of life. I don't want to have an hour commute to my job. And so, yeah, that's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective.
Can I ask you a question here?
Councilmember
Yeah.
Cornish.
First, thank you so much for coming out. We know it takes a lot of time at the end of the day to come out and to speak out. It's a very important issue, and we want to hear from people, especially your generation, on housing. My question is this: if you had an ideal housing you could move into tomorrow, what would that look like?
Honestly, it'd probably be a starter home. Doesn't need to be anything fancy. Probably one bed, one bath, with places where I can ride my bike or access to transit, something like that. And that would, I don't have a lot to ask. It's just that, like, if I were to try to buy my parents' house, it was 250K when they bought it. It's tripled in value. That's not something I can afford or any of my generation can afford. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just want a a starting place, basically. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving online, please.
Madam Mayor, first up is Alexandra Mondra.
Alexandra, are you there?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Mondra. I live at 2222 West Kootenai Street in Boise, and I am in favor of the proposed zoning changes. And I want to mention that I'm strongly in support of the changes to the affordability incentives. I'm a strong proponent of affordability. I know it's really important for our community. And I also know that the market is essentially incapable of delivering housing for folks with lower incomes. But the easiest and simplest way to reduce housing costs is to build more of it. A few months ago, there was an article in Salt Lake City's equivalent to our Boise Dev that reported that new LIHTC funded projects were not filling up in a matter of months like they normally do. And the reason was that renters who normally would require that subsidized housing had their pick of market rate or subsidized housing because there were so many units of market housing that came onto the market that the rents were essentially the same across those different housing options. So it's just more evidence that the more housing we have, the more choice that our community members have in where they live. And creating policy to incentivize housing is only effective if it's used. So in my opinion, it's objectively better if we get housing built at 80% AMI than no housing built at 60% AMI. So I'm strongly in favor of those changes, and I hope we continue to monitor the impact and effectiveness of those. I'm also really glad that the city has heard the public that we want continued progress on creating parity for duplex, triplex, and fourplexes with single family homes. And I'd also like to recommend some additional things to consider for housing flexibility and general affordability, including further reducing minimum lot sizes, further reducing setbacks, allowing encroachment into drive aisles or driveways. And I want to support also looking at that imposing of sidewalk requirements on lots that don't have adjacent sidewalks or active development adjacently. I also think it's really a good idea to remove height limits in residential zones. There are other regulatory limits and market forces that will naturally limit height in these areas. So I think it's another area where creating flexibility on the city's side could make sense. I also really hope that the city continues to look at parking mandates in the next code update. Excessive parking mandates directly impact housing costs. And I think that the small scale developers who testified before me could speak to that as far as like the numbers and impacts on their projects. And I've personally experienced it as the most affordable apartments I've lived in, including 2 different apartments in Boise, were unsubsidized older housing stock, not compliant even with our modern zoning code. While I lived in those units, my household had 0 or 1 car. And according to census estimates, 5% of Boise households have no car and 32% have 1. However, our zoning code requires more than 1 parking space per multifamily unit in general, while it only requires 1 for single family housing. So it's a burden on multifamily developers to provide that parking. And I think removing mandates is generally the best way to go, but at a minimum, looking at parity there as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. We can go on to the next.
Madam Mayor, next up is Cole Bailey.
Thank you. Cole, go ahead.
Hey there, Madam Mayor and Council. Thanks so much for letting me speak. So I'm coming to you as a ADU builder and small infill builder, and my address, by the way, is 1413 Cottonwood Court in Boise. So I currently have 20 to 25 units in planning that I'm going to be bringing to Boise as either ADUs, small subdivisions, or cottage villages. And I really just want to focus my comments on two areas. So the first being the sidewalks that have been brought up repeatedly this evening. So a specific project that I'm doing on Howard Street, which turns into Manitou, very close to Manitou Park, is classified by ACHD as a collector road. And there's an existing detached 5-foot sidewalk with an 8-foot landscape buffer that the current code is going to mandate for me to deconstruct that sidewalk and rebuild it. I added in my comments that it doesn't seem to align with the city's objectives to be carbon neutral by 2050. We're tearing out perfectly good concrete and putting it back. Just makes no sense. It fills up the landfill, and carbon is one of the highest emitting, concrete's one of the highest carbon emitting materials that we put on the construction site. And then the next thing that I would like to talk about is the affordability incentive around minor land division. So minor land division is one of the fastest and most affordable ways that we can create more building lots to produce more supply and therefore by market force decrease housing prices in Boise. And unfortunately, the 120% AMI restriction is just not rooted in reality. It sounds great in theory. I would love to see the pro formas that were studied where that affordable incentive makes sense, because I've looked at dozens of projects and none of those projects have made sense as a for sale project at 120% of AMI. And, there's multiple projects where we've even had to consider, or other friends are developing them through a full subdivision process, which involves additional costs from a civil engineer, from a landscape architect, $20,000 to $30,000 in design costs, which will result in a non-price restricted product. But then that additional price to build that project will ultimately pass on to the end consumer and have the opposite desired effect and increase the price of housing, rather than decrease it. So I really think if you could be more creative in the minor land divisions, allowing smaller lots like it used to be before the code update, and reducing or eliminating those price restrictions on that small of a development, I think that you'll see a ton of creative folks in town find a way to bring housing online, especially in the downtown core, 83705, 83706, where people really want to live. Yeah. Thanks for letting me comment.
Thanks very much. It
Madam
looks
Mayor,
like
I got a
we
question.
might have
Yeah.
a couple of questions for you, Councilmember Halliburton and then Councilmember Morales.
Cool. Thanks for calling in. It looks like you're so close here. You should have just come down to
The
the
doors
city.
were locked. Yeah, I tried to get in. The doors were locked. So here I am.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you calling in. I've got a question for you. I mean, the sidewalks keep coming up, and I don't necessarily have a question about the sidewalks. I have a question about the multiple meetings that you're having with ACHD in the city of Boise, and wondering if you can talk to if that's a challenge, having to work with multiple jurisdictions on some of these smaller developments that you're doing, and if there's a process where that could be streamlined.
Yes, certainly. So there's another subdivision that's on Vermont Street, 83705, maybe a mile from Boise State. And so I'm getting conflicting messages for an exposed irrigation canal from both Public Works and ACHD. So I think anything that could streamline to where, there's, I guess, one agency that's in charge of what those improvements are, that would be fantastic. The other thing that's conflicting is the detached requirement from City of Boise does not align with ACHD, right? So they'll say something like, oh, well, since that canal is there, if you have to have a detached sidewalk, you'll have to bury that canal, which will add $50,000 of cost to your project. But us as ACHD, we don't mind if you attach it to the road, but you'd have to get a variance from City of Boise, which I'm hearing, no, it's black and white. You have to do it detached, so you'll have to bury that canal. So therefore, I just won't build a house on that lot, and that'll be one less, house that someone could buy, a mile from Boise State.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole. Appreciate you calling in.
Yep.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Morales.
Hey, Cole, thank you so much for all of your feedback, your written testimony as well. And I just wanted to ask you, because obviously I know you've been in this industry for maybe a handful of years, because not long ago you were at Boise State. And so just kind of curious what Jamie brought up earlier, this incubating more incremental developers, and wondering what that support has looked like for you locally. And if you have any thoughts on our ability to help facilitate some of that support.
Yeah, I love what Ali Rabe and the Gem State Housing Alliance is doing. So, contributing member there. I think that she has some really good things in mind, and the sponsors kind of behind that group have some good things in mind. And their written testimony will speak much more eloquently to those points than me. But I think really just decreasing red tape and decreasing restrictions will allow incremental developers to build. There's a lot of really creative people in this town that want to invest in real estate, that want to build speculatively, that want to build rentals, but it has to pencil, right? And so if the pro forma doesn't make sense, housing doesn't come online. And that's really the largest risk or potential failure that I see in the current proposed update.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate I'm sorry that you could not get into the building.
Oh, no worries.
But appreciate you hanging in there. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Madam Mayor, our last person is Patrick Spouts.
Hi, Patrick. Welcome.
Thank you. Patrick Spouts. I live at 753 West Sandstone Court in Boise. I'm a founding member of the Neighbors for Boise group and a board member on the Gem State Housing Alliance. I come here today to support the changes and also ask for us to go farther, and want to make a couple of particular points that I think build on some of the other testimony that you've heard today. In particular, I want to kind of answer some of the questions that Councilman Nash actually asked earlier of another one of the testifying. I think it was Mike. So on the parking minimum question about, well, what do we do when there is that tension with overflowing street parking? Boise does have a mechanism for a group of residents to apply and go through a process for a residential permitting zone. And this has been done in some areas in the city, and we could make that process easier or make some changes to it or make people more aware. So that is an option before us. I also want to point out that I believe Seattle's a tricky case, but other than Seattle, I think we're one of the largest city in the Northwest that has parking minimums like we do. Spokane has eliminated them entirely. They're, a good peer city. Anchorage, also a peer city, has eliminated them entirely. Portland has eliminated them entirely. Bend, Oregon, smaller, but similar in some other ways to Boise, has eliminated them entirely. Montana has also at the state level made large reductions that, depending on the particular set of things, are either equal to ours or lower than ours. There's also been statewide laws that influenced both the Oregon cities and a bunch of other Washington cities. So in my view, in review of the Northwest, we're kind of an outlier on the high side today with where our parking minimums are. So I'd encourage us to consider going all the way and removing them entirely. And then I want to speak a little bit about the setbacks and really just in general talk about Spokane and list a bunch of numbers of where their dimensional standards end up, because I really look to Spokane's version of zoning reform as a kind of a guiding light and considered a best practice. So some setbacks of where they ended up, and things, as far as I can tell in the news media, seem to be going fine. In their R1 and R2 equivalent zones, their front setbacks 10 feet, their interior sides are 3 or 5 if it's a 40-foot or wider lot. Street side setbacks 5 feet and rear 15 feet. As mentioned, they have no parking minimums. Their minimum lot size is 1,200 square feet. Their minimum lot width is 15 feet. And they also have essentially no different strings attached or requirements building duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. They were doing sixplexes for a while, but there's some legal stuff going around those. But up to fourplex, they have essentially no additional requirements. And when I review what they're seeing built, it's a fair amount. So I think it's going well up there, and their dimensional standards are fantastic. And we should look to those examples to feel more comfortable if we are thinking of moving in that direction. I also want to, like many other speakers today, speak up for the minor lot division, making that easier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Yes, Councilmember Nash.
Patrick, could you tell me your thoughts on minor land divisions?
I think that with the strings that we're attaching, we see fewer of them. I've talked to developers, and that's the example that I'm hearing. And I would like to see us make that an easier process. And it's really a way to allow for small lot development to take place and allow us to have more small infill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. Okay, so as far as I know, I think that's the end of our public testimony. So with that, we will close the public hearing, and the item is before the commission or the council. Sorry, 6 years. The last time I ran a meeting was for 6 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I'm used to running it as a commission, but thanks for your patience tonight with my first time doing it with council.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve ZOA 25-00013 for a citywide zoning ordinance amendment of Boise City Code, Title 11.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor, I'll kick us off here.
Great.
First of all, thank you all for coming down. It's kind of like a flashback from when we actually passed the modern zoning code in the first place. Most of the same people, except for a large group of people that aren't here. So great to see everyone. I want to second the praise for the nonprofit folks who showed up today. Appreciate all of your work so much. And I, kind of wanted to be careful throughout the meeting to make sure that we were sort of keeping it in line with like, here's what is actually proposed in here, and kind of not trying to stray too far of where we may want to go. One of the things I think that our staff has heard me say on a number of occasions really is that flexibility, because when we passed the modern zoning code, the goal was to make it more predictable, because our last zoning code was no longer predictable. We were doing a lot of zoning code changes, and so neighbors were being surprised when something happened in their yard. And if you want to make something very predictable, then there's like a very specific standard, and it's square, and it's this dimension, and it always looks like this. And so predictability sometimes kind of has a conflict when it comes to flexibility, especially when you put two different jurisdictions, ACHD and the city of Boise, involved, when you're getting both land use and then like transportation, street design in the same bucket, which is a bit of a challenge. I'm never going to be a person who advocates for not putting sidewalks as a requirement in zoning code, but I am always going to be a person who wants to give our staff flexibility in addressing things that make sense or don't make sense. And the challenge I think that we oftentimes see is that, any of us can go out to a neighborhood and say like, yeah, it doesn't make sense for there to be a sidewalk here, or it could be detached, or it could be attached, and that makes sense. And that also, that level of actually looking at every single inch of every single property is also very difficult for our staff to do and be able to maintain any sort of realistic time frame and getting things approved. Somewhere though, there's a sweet spot where we can try to figure out like, how do we maintain the same zoning code that's predictable, that thousands of people gave input on over the course of a long period of time, while also making sure that there's flexibility for common sense of what we're trying to do. And I want to caution us from going too far of like removing anything or doing anything too wild into the future, but really understanding what those needs are and those nuances, because it doesn't make sense to have somebody rip out a sidewalk and put it back in, or for a new sidewalk to go back into or a sidewalk to go into a spot that will never be developed on either side. And so I think that there's something there. The last thing that I just want to say, and it really struck me because I've been thinking a lot about how much money we're investing in affordable housing as a city with our land trust, and I'm so proud of it. Hundreds and hundreds of units that we've been able to get in across the entire city, and millions of dollars that we've spent doing it. Oftentimes somewhere around 40,000-ish per unit. And then I'm also hearing from a nonprofit who came in here today that said about $25,000 difference on a lot from some additional expenses pretty much made it so that we weren't getting about 4 more units, maybe 6 more units into a particular area. And so I do think that there is opportunity for flexibility and partnership when we're talking about affordable housing that goes beyond just the incentives that we have, the affordable housing incentives. Like if we're really looking at investment, who are our partners out there that we could be incentivizing or partnering with to kind of get to that lower level that we're not getting now that we're going to 80% instead of 60%. But there's either potentially a partnership or some work with a nonprofit at $25,000 per unit or less. That's significantly less than what we're spending now. So I appreciate you all coming in, because I think that it inspired a lot of good discussion for us to think about going forward. And I appreciate that you all brought that map out for us to look at. And I think that those are the two things really sticking with me is, how do we not throw out the predictability, make sure that we're moving towards our transportation and climate goals that oftentimes have to do with detached sidewalks, but also understanding like what's smart and what makes sense and what partnership looks like to achieve some of these goals that maybe we're not quite getting to.
Councilmember Nash.
Madam Mayor, I just want to let staff know that I made a promise to Maureen Brewer that we would not upend these zoning code changes because she was unavailable tonight, and but we're hoping that she starts to feel better soon. Appreciate the work that's gone into this. Appreciate the feedback that you've taken from council. Appreciate people coming out here tonight, and for the advocacy from Neighbors for Boise, Gym State Housing Alliance. My direction to staff generally would be almost everything that I see, those types of things that this group that's testified here tonight and Allie advocate for are things that I generally endorse. Every once in a while, something gets brought up that's probably more of a Twitter solution than it actually is an actual solution. But I would say generally those are the types of things we want to see, and we want to be pushing the envelope on what we're comfortable with. And maybe there's times where we test something that's just not quite working, and then we pull back. But as we do these continuous improvements, those are the things that we'd like to see. So we just like to keep that dialogue going. I also just have some feedback, maybe less feedback and more just like commentary on those folks that would like to see us do more. What we did was a pretty big deal a few years ago, and I share the view that we can and should be doing more. I was very encouraged to see rents come down at the beginning of the year, but it's still not affordable. And some of those things are in our control, some of them are not. But I do want to point out the fact that we have had 2 elections since that was passed, and there has been no referendum on what we've done. And do not take that for granted. And I think this kind of tension between staff, council, members of the public, I think we are doing a good job collectively at balancing that in a way that there has not been a referendum on the things that we're trying to do, and that we have seen positive results. So I would say frustrations that you may have brought here, totally valid. Let's recognize that some level of incrementalism is going to make these things that we're doing politically viable. So thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
First of all, I really want to thank staff for all their hard work on these zoning code changes. It's not easy. We get a lot of input from a lot of people on different things we want to see. And I know that they've been pouring heart and soul and listening to so many different suggestions. And I'm proud to support what we have for the changes tonight. I think they go towards our goal of trying to continuously improve upon our zoning code. And I think that's what we heard from a lot tonight is like, we did good. We implemented a new zoning code. It's having positive results. But don't take your foot off the gas. Keep going, keep making the changes. And I think that's what you see us doing here. I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight to providing their comments and suggestions. I think everyone here on this dais acknowledges that there is more we can do and there's more we want to do. And we're going to continue to do that. As Deanna noted to begin with, we do have a cycle for zoning code improvements, and we're going to continue with that. I guess when I talk to staff, I'd say I think we need to review these detached sidewalks. Do we need these in all areas, or can we have attached sidewalks 5 foot? I think this is something we need to do more work and would like to see in our next revision is some deeper dive into that. And I also want to call out NeighborWorks, Habitat for Humanity for being out here and being good partners and being part of Housing Solutions. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, I'll get my greatest hits in here. I do want to thank our staff. This is modern zoning code had to have been an incredible lift. It was before my time here. I did come and testify in support of it on reducing parking minimums, actually, which was appreciated hearing that a little bit more tonight too, and quite a bit in planning and zoning too. It was a big topic point when this came before planning and zoning. But our staff, the amount of work that went into that, observing, moving into the new modern zoning code, the planning process, and kind of getting your feet set pretty quickly to be able to now start going through these cycles of continuous improvement is so appreciated. And so thank you so much for all that work. And I know it'll continue. We got a lot of good feedback here tonight. I wanted to flag a couple of the things that maybe we didn't talk about in this update. One of which is I want to appreciate or thank our staff for considering updates to allow indoor recreation facilities in the industrial light area. And so that was something that was not allowed under the modern zoning code. There's a couple examples of facilities like that, but in an area with extreme temperatures and climate impacts, like being able to have facilities like this considered through the CUP process, I think is great. The changes to development in the B1 areas of our airport influence area overlay, I think are really important as well. We've had quite a few applications come before us with these, and in our current version of the code, it says 5 units per acre or a CUP. And that 5 units per acre, that's the quick, easy way for a developer to do it. And so that's usually what they're going to do. And we saw one of those next to Molinar Park and the elementary school there, because that was the easy, quick way to do it. But a lot of these areas make a lot of sense. And so as we saw on that map, I took my kids to the movies this last weekend, and the Boise Spectrum just isn't popping like it used to be when I was a kid. When Game World was there and everything. And I was telling my kids about how great it was. And, it really is an area adjacent to that B1 zone that can use more housing. It's a great activity center. And I'm hoping that these changes will help with that. So I appreciate our airport team and our staff coming together to figure out, what makes sense in this area, what we feel comfortable with. And I do just I'll make a comment quickly on parking minimums. If we look at our applications over the past few years, we still get a lot of overparked. Overparked's probably a bad term. We get a lot of development applications that have more parking spots than are required. And I think that speaks to some of the comments we heard from developers tonight about meeting the demand of the residents that need to buy those homes or rent those homes, and being able to trust them. We've had developers come before us that have, data from their projects to know that's really only 1.5. Maybe they have a car share program. Maybe they're on a transit corridor and those kinds of things. And so I think there really is an opportunity to continue moving the needle on that one. And then appreciated, especially in planning and zoning. I think there was a lot of talk about sidewalks, and appreciate staff's responsiveness and communicating during that hearing on that, whether it's fee in lieu or what that looks like. And so I expect that we'll be able to have more conversations. So kind of all to wrap that up, I just want to thank everyone that participated in this process. A lot of really good written comment, and it's without those stakeholder opinions, we can't make it better. The worst thing would be if people said, well, we just can't develop in Boise, so we're just not gonna come comment about it. And I've heard a developer say that before, and that makes my heart hurt. We need to hear these things so that we can continue to move, especially in a tough market. So thank you to all those who participated in this process as well.
Okay, I'll add my last comments to this. I just think it's amazing that after, I think it's 3 years now, we still have community members showing up to participate in this process and support the work we're doing and challenge us to do more. I'm really proud of these changes today, and I want to thank the Planning and Zoning Commission. Most importantly, though, the staff. Not only is it a huge lift to make these recommendations and bring these changes to us, but then they have to implement those new changes and remember those changes after just learning a code. And I know it's a huge burden, but I appreciate the partnership and the willingness to evolve with us. A couple of call outs on things that I'm really excited about of the changes that we're making tonight, not just about what more changes we can make, but tonight I'm excited about the junior ADUs, the in-law suites, made easier, adding the second kitchen inside single family homes, because under the old code, that would have automatically triggered a 2-unit status, which brought a different whole bucket of permitting and building code requirements. So this change, in my opinion, removes a huge barrier to allowing multi-generational households and anyone looking to create an affordable in-law suite without that full permitting process. Another one is the 2 ADUs or tiny homes on wheels per single family lot. This is a big deal because now a single family homeowner can have 2 ADUs, 2 tiny homes on wheels, or one of each on a single lot. That potentially triples the number of units that they would have on their property. And I think it treats homeowners as partners in this housing shortage and the discussion around it and the solutions. I think the more flexible incentives menu is really important rather than, as we heard tonight, we need flexibility. So rather than a one size fits all, I think it's great that we're adding that flexibility. And then the affordability requirement from 60% to 80%, we heard it said a couple of different times, but we need affordable housing. If we're not getting any at 60, we'll take what we can get at 80. So I'm excited. I think it's a kind of a courageous admission of we're not able to see what we wanted to see from 60%. So let's try something new. And then lastly, the parking reform as a housing tool. I think that what I read in the transcripts and all of the public feedback was that there's strong momentum there from commissioners, VRT, public commenters. And so it's interesting to continue that conversation. But I really appreciate the work tonight. I appreciate all the public showing up to participate in this and all the public comment we got. And I think with that, will the clerk please call the roll?
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor, make a motion to adjourn. To adjourn for the evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And all opposed? Thank you. With that, we are adjourned.